did a LinkedIn Live that was a topic of consistency. So how consistency has been a key principle in the work that I do, with my business, with the work, my work as a family member, partner, spouse, with my wife, and as a dad to my son, and also consistency, especially around ultra running. I use that as an example. The consistency that has enabled me to continue to do more things and set higher and higher standards for myself. What I wanted to do today is get a little bit more specific and talk about 3 specific strategies on how to be more consistent. So not just why is this thing important, like consistency is something you should do. I think for most of us, we would agree, yeah, okay, I should be more consistent. I should. The question, of course, is, well, how? How do I become more consistent? And so there's a lot of different strategies that have worked for me. And for the clients that we've coached, for example, around building out new systems and being more consistent with their sales work. Specifically, though, I just want to focus on 3 today that I think if I share those with you, that will give you some ways to think through something you might be able to implement right away. And maybe not all 3, but at least one of those 3 to implement so that you can be more consistent around that thing to which you want to be more consistent. So the 3 that I want to talk about is, number 1 is making time and scheduling everything. The second is communication with the people around you. And the third is thinking about small wins and building momentum. So I'll just take a couple minutes on each. And again, just think through how you might apply what I'm sharing here into your work or your day or your routine so that you can become more consistent. So number 1, when I talk about making time or scheduling everything, one of the things that I do is I schedule everything. I mean everything. And to the point where it might feel like, am I being too overzealous about my schedule and my calendar? Maybe. However, my experience has been that this will also help with communication, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And so first of all, when I say schedule everything, it's because oftentimes we think about the we should maxim. It's like, oh, I should do this, I should do that, I want to do that. And we say, well, geez, if I only had the time, like how could I find the time to do that? And my way of thinking about this is not to find the time, but to make the time. And so when you begin to schedule everything, it helps, at least for me, it helps me see what time is truly available to me in my day and where I might be able to trim or trash certain tasks or activities that are either low value, could be delegated out, or just simply or even further, like might even be negatively affecting me. So, I add all of my running and training to my work calendar, even if I'm planning to do a run that's at 5:00 in the morning when I first wake up. I still put that into my work calendar so that I can see it. And I do that for the entire week ahead. So I look at my training program that my running coach has given me, and then I map the activities that he is recommending that I do into my calendar, because there are some days where I can get up at 5 in the morning and go out and knock out a run first thing in the morning. There are other mornings where I can't do that. And so then I've got to find an hour or 90 minutes later in the day. And I'm trying to work that time into my work calendar and into my responsibilities as a dad and as a husband. And so when I schedule everything, what that allows me to do is figure out exactly when do I have the time, or how do I make the time available. And sometimes I have to make the time by getting up at 4 in the morning and going for a run at 5. And sometimes I can figure out a way to double up on tasks. So as an example, today in the afternoon, my son is going to do a rock climbing camp, after school camp, and that runs from I think 4:30 until 5:45. Right. So we got to leave here the house at 4:15. Make sure we get there for check-in. And so he's got an hour and 15 minutes where he's going to be doing rock climbing. And so for me, in my running program, I have a 60-minute run that's scheduled. So perfect. So now I can double up on tasks. Instead of like dropping them off and coming home and picking them back up, I can just drop them off, make sure I'm in my running gear before I go for a 60-minute run and be back by the time he's about finishing up. And that still gives me a chance to cool down, do some stretching, maybe do a little bit of strength work, some push-ups or something. So by the time he's done his rock climbing day, we can head home and have dinner together. So that's an example of being able to see, not just assuming that I'm going to find the time to do a 60-minute run. It's looking at my calendar, knowing like I have to do this because my wife is not available in the afternoon. She's doing something else that's important to her. So if it's my responsibility to take him to camp, by scheduling that and seeing that in my work calendar and then putting the training time in my work calendar, it just helps me see when I've got time available. I mentioned about finding ways to trim or trash tasks or activities. So when I look at my work calendar and if looking for in the consistency, I'm talking about training, but it could be consistency for you. It might be, well, I want to start doing 20 outbound touches a day, or I want to start doing one-on-one meetings with everybody on my team each week, but I don't know how I'm going to make the time to do that. Well, one of the other ways you can do is to trim or trash activities in your calendar. This is something I learned through a book called Clockwork. And in that book, they talk about looking at your calendar and saying, well, what are some activities that maybe you're scheduling an hour to do that you could do in 30 minutes? Or what are some activities you could just trash and move off of your calendar altogether? So this is something that I frequently do is if I see that there's a meeting on the calendar that's scheduled for an hour, I will back it off to 30 minutes. If I see I've got a 30-minute meeting, I'll see if we can back that down to 15 minutes. And I'm looking for ways just to make time, because however much time you give yourself for a task is typically how long that task is going to take. If you book an hour-long call, it's going to take an hour to do that call. If you give yourself 30 minutes, you can knock it out in 30 minutes, and the other person on the other side will appreciate that. I also think about this idea of scheduling everything because I share my calendar, not every meeting from my work calendar, but all of my personal stuff that I put on my work calendar, I also share with my wife on my wife's calendar. And that includes trail runs that I'm doing on Saturday mornings. That includes activities that I'm doing. Like I have a running club meeting tonight where I'm a board member of our local running club. We have a meeting tonight from 7 to 8 o'clock. Now that's outside of work hours, but I put that on the calendar and then I let her know so that we can make sure that we're aligned, because she actually also has something else this evening. So it forces a way for us to communicate that, oh, she's going to go do this flying lesson as a flight instructor to teach somebody how to fly. At the same time, I've got this running meeting. So now we have to communicate about what does that mean? Can I do the running meeting on Zoom while my son is watching Mythbusters? Yeah, we can do that. No big deal. But if it's a bigger conflict, like I was planning to do a trail run and she was planning to do something else on a Saturday, or she has to do some work on Saturday because she's got a big project that's due. Now we are forcing communication around, okay, what's the priority? How can we balance this? Can I move my run to Sunday? Can I make sure that I'm back before noon so she has the rest of the afternoon to do the work so that we still have family time in the afternoon and the evening to have dinner together on a Saturday? So this idea of like scheduling everything, it just forces you to make sure that you actually can make the time, and where can you find the time to do it? I would also say, I mentioned that some activities are not just low value, but could be even negatively affecting you. When you start to schedule everything, it keeps you accountable. If you look at your calendar every day, if I look at my Tuesdays, for example, or my Thursdays, they tend to be very full days because those are heavy focus days on clients and coaching. And I do other stuff on those days, like I'm doing this video right now and doing this recording. But most of those days are geared around clients, delivery, coaching calls, setting up live trainings, doing new content, all of those things. Well, if I have all of those tasks built into my work calendar, and then I add what I want to do on the personal side with training, and then I add things that I need to do as a dad, make sure my son gets to rock climbing camp, and balance my wife's responsibilities with the stuff that I've got to do. Now all of a sudden I look at my day and I realize I don't have time to waste. I don't have time to spend, in that 30-minute block that I might have open between 12:30 and 1. If it's showing open in my calendar and there's some white space, then this mindset of schedule everything is an opportunity for me to say, okay, what can I do in those 30 minutes? Instead of treating those 30 minutes as like, well, I guess I got some downtime between calls. Okay, it's okay to have some downtime, but maybe there's something else I could do. Maybe in those 30 minutes, I could go outside and walk the dog, do a short walk to make sure that the dog gets a walk, because I'm going to be taking my son to rock climbing. My wife's not available. And so our dog might not get a longer walk in the afternoon that she might get. So now, because I'm scheduling everything, it makes sure that I'm using that time efficiently and making sure that it's a way to leverage the open space in a positive way, not to try to jam everything in and be minute to minute, always scheduled. But then instead of saying, well, I've got 30 minutes and I'll check the news, or I'll futz around on email, or do something else that might not be productive, it's the mindset of saying, well, what could I be doing with those 30 minutes that's going to benefit me and benefit the people, or in this case, the animals around me, right? So that's number one, is just schedule everything. And I think the more you get in the habit of doing that, I think that will help you figure out what time you really do have available. I use color codes in my calendar, different colors for different kinds of meetings, different colors for different personal stuff. Internal meetings are gray colored. Coaching calls are green color. Sales related stuff is a peach color. Anything personal is purple. So we've got these different color codes, and it allows me to just get a snapshot of what's going on in the day, and also allows the team who has access to my calendar to see what else is happening. And that's the final thing I want to mention about schedule everything. It will lead into communication in a minute, is that when I do the schedule everything, that means like on Wednesday mornings, as an example, that's one day in the week when I have blocked that time out from 5 in the morning until 10 in the morning. It's blocked out as Scott does a long run on the hills. And that means the team knows, do not schedule stuff for me there. If there is a client that needs to meet early in the morning, no worries. We have Tuesday available, we have Thursday available, we have Friday available. There are other days other than Wednesday that we can do that. And the same with sales related calls. If there's somebody who wants to join the program, is interested in learning more, no worries. We can do it Wednesday afternoon if Wednesday has to be the day. But blocking out that time makes sure that I never have to worry about sacrificing the things that are important to me and are necessary for me to reach my other goals. I have to do these long runs twice a week. I do a long trail run on Saturdays, and I do a shorter trail run on Wednesday mornings up in the hills. I still get back home before too late, and I still have the rest of the day ahead, but it's something I gotta do. If I don't put that time in the schedule, it would be easy for Jocelyn or Matt or Amy to just say, oh, well, Scott looks like he's open on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, so I'm going to book in a call with him. But if I'm not back from the trail before 9 o'clock, or I'm just, getting out of the truck and haven't showered, do I really want to get on a Zoom call with somebody? But again, by scheduling everything, it just keeps everyone really clear about what needs to get done, and helps me make sure I get those most important things into the calendar. So that's number one. So number two, let's talk about schedule. We talked about schedule everything. Let's talk about communication. And an extension to this would also be establishing a reward system. So communication starts by scheduling, and then making sure that people around you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. So my team knows I do this ultra running. My team knows it's important to me. It's part of who I am. It's how I express myself, and it's an outlet for me for any of the stress that I might be feeling from running a business and helping the startup clients that we help every single day. So they know this is important to me. So that's good. For my wife, she knows it's important to me that I do these, because again, it's part of who I am and part of my personal expression. And so what I would also say is, though, just communicate why those things are important. Not just that it is important, but why is it important? Like, hey, Lena, the reason I'm doing the long runs on Wednesdays and Saturdays are because Wednesday is a good break in the week for me. Between Monday and Tuesday, I can go do a long run. It helps break the stress. I can get out in the hills. That's a day where she doesn't have early morning requirements for her work. So we've just sort of decided, okay, Wednesday's the best day midweek. And the reason why I do this long runs on Saturdays is so that I can take Sunday off from training and just make Sunday a completely full focus day on family stuff. So that's why it's a Wednesday and a Saturday. It's not just that I'm scheduling these on Wednesdays and Saturdays because I want to. Yeah, I want to do those things. But it's also important for them to know why I've chosen those days, so they understand some of the psyche and psychology around it. Right. So the why behind it is part of the communication. And it's also important to think about that reward system. So as you're communicating it with the people around you, like if I communicate to my son, say, hey, listen, one of the things we're going to be doing over the next 3 weeks is I'm going to be really focused on, delivering this workshop that we're going to be running. And so in days past, I used to travel to San Francisco for a couple of days at a time and do client events, or I used to do workshops and teach, sometimes even traveling different parts of the country. And so when I'm telling him what I'm doing, it's not just why I'm doing it, but it's also what will we get, right, as a result of me doing this work. And so, if I tell him like, look, this next week, I've got a lot of sales calls early in the morning, so I might not be able to help you out with breakfast as much as usual. But while that might be a bummer in the short run, the good news is, like, if we hit certain sales goals, what if we decided to go to Legoland once things open up again? Like, he's always wanted to go to Legoland. So if we can hit, as a team, we think of this as like your contribution to this team is, hey, maybe you can get breakfast for yourself, or maybe you can be You can make sure that you get your schoolwork done so you don't have to worry about me checking in. And if your job is to do that, you're contributing to my ability to do my work. And then together, by working on these things together, you get what you want, which is a trip to Legoland. So, and it doesn't have to be a trip to Legoland. It could be, like, hey, this week, we're going to do these things, and I'm going to be on a trail run on Saturday. When I get back, then we're going to spend the rest of the day doing stuff together. We're going to go to the basketball court and play basketball. We're going to go to the soccer field, or I set up a play date with your friends, and in the afternoon, we're going to go over to their house and go swimming, right? So, but the communication piece, I think, also needs to include some reward, and that's the why for them, not just the why for you. Personally, why is important to you, but it's also the why it's important to them, and it gives them some motivation and incentive to help you along the way. And again, these are just strategies that work for me. They're not perfect; they don't always work for me. Certainly, I could always do a better job communicating. Maybe I do try to schedule too much at one time, and then I end up juggling things around. But generally speaking, these are the first two of the three that I want to share that tend to work. The third thing I want to share, the third principle around how to be more consistent, is to start small. You want to accumulate quick wins. You want to build momentum. And I'll use the same analogy I've been using in some of this thread, which is training. Right? If I'm training for a 100-mile race, if I start my training in January for a race at the end of June, I'm not going to go out on January 4th and expect to do a 50-mile run. Right? I know I need to build up to that. Right? I know I need to build over the course of months to get to a place where I feel comfortable doing a 50-mile run in training if I need to, in order to be ready for a 100-mile run. I know on January 4th, I'm not going to set a PR on my deadlifts in the garage. Right? I'm not going to set a PR when it comes to my mileage and my pace. Right? I'm going to start small. So in those first few weeks, and you're building up base miles. Maybe in that week, those first couple of weeks, it's like, hey, I'm going to run 30 miles a week for those first 3 or 4 weeks to make sure that my body is up and running and that I'm feeling good. Because eventually in January, by the end of January, I'm going to start thinking of how do I bump it up to 50 miles in a week? And how do I do a 30-mile run as part of training in March or in April, which is something I'm doing now. I'm doing a 50K race this weekend, 31-mile run as part of my training. I couldn't have done that on January 4th. So if you start small and accumulate those small wins, it allows you to build momentum. It allows you to build some confidence as well. Because if you're, let's say in your business world, like say your goal is for your company to hit a target of 100 outbound touches a day. Like, hey, we're really clear on our target market. We've got some great messaging. We know who we can help. We've got some great success. So now we want to get the word out to more of the people in our target market, right? We want to do 100 a day. But if you've never done outbound, maybe all of your sales so far have come from inbound or referrals or through land and expand with your current customers. And now you want to add this outbound strategy as part of your sales and revenue focus. Cool. That's probably something you should do. But if you start off the first week and say, like, how do we go from 0 outbound to 100 touches in a day? Well, you're going to set yourself up for failure. Because even if you do 90, we're like, wow, we did 90, but we didn't do 100. Right? That's kind of ridiculous to think that way. And also, let's make sure you're doing it the right way. Right? Just like I would want to build up on my training to make sure my form is right, that I don't have any persistent injuries. I don't want to try to lift too much weight on a dead weight so that I end up injuring myself. I want to make sure my form is good with lighter weight. You want to do the same thing with an outbound strategy, right? So build up. Say if your goal is to get to 100 touches per day, it doesn't have to be the first week. It could be, hey, we're going to do 30 minutes or a power hour per day just to see how many good outbound touches we can do in 1 hour. Right? Because that is going to help you figure out how much time you actually need to schedule if you want to do 100 outbound in a day. Right? If you think about, well, I'll just do 100 in a day. How hard could that be? I could just load those up into Sales Loft, or I can load those up into HubSpot, or I can load those up into some other platform and then just start sending them out. Maybe you realize, like, wow, this actually, to do some personalization takes some time. So instead of looking at the target of being 100 outbound in a day, you can say, well, let's do it for an hour every day for a week. And let's see how many good touches we can do in an hour. Because you might find maybe you can only do 12 in an hour. Maybe the first day you only do 8. You're like, wow, that took a lot of time just to do 8 touches. But gosh, I learned something. And maybe I've got some templates now that I've built. And maybe the second day you do 15. And the third day you do 20. And the fourth day you do 20 again. And the fifth day you do 25. Now you're starting to get a feel for, okay, in an hour, I can do 20 on average. I can do 20 good touches in 1 hour. So that means if we're going to do 100 outbound touches in a day, I have to make sure, whether it's me personally or my team, is blocking out 5 hours of time to do this right. It informs you about what time you need to do the thing that you want. And further, just if you say, I'm just going to do it for an hour, you set yourself up to win. And like, hey, I'm going to schedule this 1 hour power hour of doing outbound. And whether I do 5 or 8 or 10 or 12 a day for that first week, the win is that I'm doing it and I've done it for an hour and now I have information and now I've improved it. And so then you can go, okay, well, how do we go from 20 in an hour to maybe nudging it to 25 or 30? Or maybe you just realize like, hey, we can only do 20 good ones in an hour. And maybe it's 15 good ones in an hour. Whatever that number is, it allows you to then figure out what those metrics should be instead of setting some metric that you really don't even know what it's going to take to get to, or setting it so high that you're setting yourself up for failure. And that way you can celebrate the small wins. You can accumulate that. You can build the momentum around the learning so that over the course of maybe at the end of the month, you say, we're going to work towards getting to 100 quality touches in a day. And from there, you might realize, well, actually 100 outbound touches isn't really the target. What the target is, how do we book 5 meetings a week? That's the real number. And so maybe that means we don't have to do 100 if we're doing them well. Maybe we only have to do 50 really good ones to get 5 meetings instead of trying to blast 100 out for those same 5 because the quality is less. And so this idea of like starting small is actually a benefit because it's going to help you figure out what the patterns are that you need to follow and what the metrics should be, so that it'll make it easier for you to follow the consistency and get into the consistency that you want. That's it. I just wanted to share the how behind the why or the what. I guess the what yesterday was the what, which is like, hey, consistency has been really an important part of my routine and helped me to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish in my training and my work and my family stuff and balancing things out. And so today I just wanted to share 3 specific strategies with some examples. So hopefully, as you've been listening, you thought to yourself, okay, I can start scheduling everything. I can start color coding. I could take a week and start mapping out. If it's like, hey, I want to start exercising, because I know I haven't been doing that. I promised myself I would. Spring is out. Things are opening up. It's easier to be outside. The weather's nicer. So, hey, the next week, I'm going to find 30 minutes a day and schedule that. And then I'm going to communicate it to my team around me, like, hey, midday at 2:00, I'm leaving the office to go do a 30-minute run walk. And in that 30 minutes, my goal is to see how far I can get in those first weeks in a sensible way. Disclaimer, make sure you contact your physician before starting any exercise program. But this idea of now you can communicate that to your team, give yourself a little incentive and a motivation, and then you're starting small and accumulating those wins and just doing it every single day, 30 minutes a day for 5 days. And then the next week you can start building. Okay, well, what if I want to do 45 minutes? Or what if I can still only fit 30 minutes in, but maybe the next week, instead of covering 2.5 miles, let me see if I can get closer to 3. Maybe by the end of the week, I can get to 3 miles in those 5 minutes and start continuing to build from there. And then maybe, weeks 3 and 4, you can start stretching it. Well, instead of doing my run midday, I'm going to get up early and see if I can get a 45-minute block in. So now I can run 4 miles instead of 3. So this is the pattern that you need to follow, or at least what I've always followed, and it's always worked for me. Whether it's starting a big training program or years ago, I had knee surgery, and I was literally starting from zero. I had torn meniscus, had to go in there and scope it out, and I was not able to run for a couple of months. I was on crutches, and it was finally time after doing physical therapy that I was approved. My physical therapist said, yeah, you can go out, try a short run. And I still remember that run. It was in 2000, I want to say it was in 2015, 2014. And when I had the knee surgery, pretty sure. And I remember months later being able to go on that first 4-mile run. And I remember thinking, on the one hand, this is glorious. I get to actually go out and run without pain. My knee is fixed. And on the other hand, it was tough because I was seeing how slow I was going, how out of breath I was, how hard 4 miles felt. So, and that was a case where I just had to start small and then rebuild from scratch. I'd been doing Ironmans already, and I had done an ultra marathon. Actually, I hadn't. It was before my first ultra, but I had been doing Ironmans in the past. So I went from doing Ironman races back down to like struggling to do a 4-mile run. So it's just starting small, accumulating those wins, building momentum, and getting back to the place where now I can do what I do every year. with 100-mile, 200-mile races. So it's the same with you, right? It's the same with your business. It's the same with your whatever it is that you want to do. So number one, schedule everything. 2, communicate and establish a reward system for you and the people around you. And number 3, start small. And if you do those things, I think that will help you get the consistency that you want around that thing that you want to do, and go farther. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to sign off. Hope you enjoyed it. See ya.